I find myself recording this chronicle in a state of somewhat duress. Some time ago, on requesting various records from Seal Archives for this very recording, I later returned to my dorms to find what every emperor-fearing imperial citizen dreads. A being clad in black bearing the rosette of the Inquisition. More specifically, in this case, a member of the Ordo Malleus. It appears that the Inquisition's attitude to the Logos Historia Versia is that while under the protection of the Lord Regent, knowledge can be freely distributed, but not so freely consumed. For where I am now, I know not. Perhaps that zealot cardinal will have his pyre after all. I say all this to warn you, dearest listener. The subject of this chronicle is not for the weak-willed, and is a paradox of itself. For of knowing this subject, you are automatically a target. But in not knowing, how can you defend yourself against an enemy you know nothing about? And so I present my next penned work, a fundamental history of our galaxy, a psychic mirror of the real, the immaterium. Before going any further, one must have here an official warning that it is by decree of the Ordo Malleus this record is sanctioned for restricted dissemination. Unauthorized exposure is punishable by immediate purgation. Proceed only if your soul is warded and your sense of self strong. And so, dearest listener, you are still here, and we shall begin. The immaterium, the warp, the sea of souls. It is the unseen half of this galaxy of ours, a realm of thought, emotion, and darkest nightmare that lies beneath the skein of reality. Every world, every mind, every moment casts a shadow into this place, and in return the warp shapes the destiny of all who live. It is a realm that defies every natural law, a dimension where thought becomes the substance, where emotion becomes the storm, time itself fractures like brittle glass. That the warp is older than the galaxy itself, older than the very first thought of sentient life. Yet it is shaped entirely by the minds of those who dwell in the real space, in the here and the now, past and the future. The time means nothing in the realm of the warp. It is an endless ocean of raw psychic energy, forever shifting and forever hungry. It mirrors the collective psyche of the entire galaxy. Every fear, every triumph, every atrocity, and every heroic deed is reflected back in impossible form. Where real space is the material, the warp is quite literally the immaterial. Like the long-rumoured oceans of the throne world, the immaterium is never still. Its tides surge with emotions of trillions. A single planetary genocide can birth a tempest that rages for centuries. A moment of galaxy-wide despair can, and has, tear open rifts large enough to swallow entire sectors. But this was not always the case. In the earliest ages of the galaxy, before the rise of the Eldari, before the first humans even walked on Terra, warp was a quiet ocean. Its tides were gentle, shaped only by the faint emotional echoes of primitive life. Warp was simply a reservoir of psychic energy, a mirror reflecting the faintest sparks of sentience. But as life evolved, so too did emotion. Fear, hope, ambition, despair. Each emotion sending ripples throughout the immaterial. Over millions of years, these ripples became waves. These waves became storms. The warp was starting to wake up. For it was one of the first sentient races, one simply known as the Old Ones, or First Ones, depending on how you wish to translate Eldari language, were the masters of biology and the first great psychic species. They were the first to harness this untapped power of the warp. They shaped life across the galaxy with its power, seeding worlds, uplifting species, and waging wars with weapons of pure thought. Their mastery and use of the immaterium fed it. Their emotions enriched it, and their conflicts scarred it. And their arrogance, they cared not. Why would they? They had already used their psychic mastery to peel off the very layer of the immaterium which we now know to be the webway, the means by which they hopped from world to world in a disgusting amphibian form. During their war in heaven, one of the species they uplifted was the Eldari. They were formed dangerously emotional. The Eldari reshaped the warp more profoundly than any species that have come before or have ever been since. Their passions, joys, sorrow, artistry, cruelty, poured into the immaterium like a flood. And from that flood, conscience formed. As I have stated previously, before the Eldari, there were 3 consciences. The Eldari made a 4th. These 4 consciences were the eye of the storm, not formed of raw emotion in the psychic realm of the immaterial. With the conclusion of the war in heaven, the warp was no longer a passive dimension. It had become a pantheon of gods. Humanity's early civilizations were blind to all this. But as the species expanded and we looked up across the stars, psychers began to appear, rare at first and then ever increasingly common. These early psychers were untrained, unregulated, and often catastrophic. Some became prophets. Others became conduits for demons, and entire colonies vanished overnight. Yet humanity, as ever, pressed forward. It was during the dark age of technology mankind developed the first warp drives in tandem with the Geller fields. This allowed ships to slip into the immaterium itself and re-emerge light years away, thus uniting humanity in a way that never been done before. But the warp was treacherous, and no machine could predict its tides. Humanity needed a guide, and evolution, or some may say experimentation, provided one, the Navigators. For the Navigator gene, a rare mutation granting psychic perception of the warp, emerged during humanity's epoch of the Golden Age. Navigators were not psychers in the more traditional sense. They did not cast lightning, read minds, or become prophets. No. Instead, they possessed a strange mutation of a third eye, this third eye capable of perceiving the currents of the immaterium. With these navigators, warp travel became reliable. Humanity spread across the galaxy in confidence. Human domination over the galaxy seemed inevitable. These navigator houses rose to power. Ancient dynasties whose bloodlines were more valuable than any starship. However, this was not to last. As per my previous penned work, with the rise of the dark age of technology comes the fall, the age of strife. For as the Eldari Empire decayed into decadence, their emotions poisoning the warp, eating the Oculus Terribus, the dreaded Eye of Terror. Its creation causing warp storms to erupt across the immaterium, severing human worlds from one another. Warp travel became impossible. Astropathic communication failed. Entire sectors were lost. This indeed was the age of strife, time of anarchy, wanton mutation and psychic awakening humanity had never seen. The birth screams of the Dark Prince loomed like a black sun. But in the aftermath, over 5 millennia later, the storms calmed, and from Terra, a new power arose. He who now sits upon the Golden Throne. For when the Emperor unified Terra and launched his Great Crusade, he also imposed a doctrine known as the Imperial Truth. It can simply be described as a secular, rationalist worldview that rejected gods, superstition, and the supernatural. It rejected the very notion of faith. Under the Imperial Truth, what was described as a physical dimension of energy. Psychers were biological anomalies, nothing more. All of this was not done out of ignorance. It was strategy. The Emperor knew the warp's true nature better than any living being. He had walked its depths and battled its entities, and he had grown to the conclusion that the very acknowledgement of the gods of chaos simply empowered them further. So he denied them, and he demanded that humanity deny them as well, starving them of our faith, starving them of our very souls. The Imperial Truth was a shield. It was a lie. It was a lie told to protect a species too vulnerable to face the horrors of the Immaterium. To help guide the fledgling Imperium through the warp and assist its navigators in travelling its storms, he created the Astronomican. psychic beacon projected through the warp by the power of the Emperor himself. It is a lighthouse by which the navigators steer their ships, the single point of stability in a sea of madness. Without it, the Imperium would simply collapse. The warp is both the Immaterium's greatest threat and the only thing keeping it going. This can be proven in more recent events, with the destruction of Lost Acadia and the birth of the Cicatrix Maledictum, the Great Rift. Our Imperium is cut in half. On one side lies the Imperium Sanctus, bathed in his holy light of the Astronomican. On the other side lies the Imperium Nihilus, cast into darkness. We know not if these worlds survive. Will we ever know? Centered at the rift, warp storms rage. Demons spill into real space. Entire sectors vanish. The warp has never been more violent, hungry. And that brings us up to the current day. To the era Indomitus, the age of the avenging sun. And yet, in the end, the Immaterium remains the Imperium's most perilous necessity. It is the ocean upon which our species sails, and the abyss in which we yet fall. Every world, every mind, every prayer and every fear feeds its tides. Every triumph echoes within it. Every atrocity stings it. To the untrained citizen, the warp is a superstition, a place of monsters and madness. The navigators see it as a sea of shifting currents. And to the enemies of mankind, it is the doorway into the realm of reality itself. As stated at the start, the warp is not merely a realm beyond sight. It is a reflection of all sentient life. Our rage, hope, despair, ambition. It is shaped by us, even as it shapes us in return. The greater consciences, gods that dwell within it, are not distant deities, but the consequences of our own and Xenos excesses, but magnified to a cosmic scale. This is the truth the Imperium dares not speak aloud. That the warp is not separate from us. It is born of us. As long as humanity endures, the Immaterium will churn. As long as humanity uses its powers, demons will claw at the gate. As long as starships cross the void, the navigators will guide us through the storms. As long as he sits upon the throne, his light will burn away the darkness, a single flame holding back an endless night. The Immaterium is our greatest danger, our greatest strength, and our greatest failure, for his dream did not last. We did not starve the warp of our faith. We fed it for 10 millennia. I will end my chronicle here, dearest listeners, and remember, knowledge is power. Guard it well. This record may now be sealed in the Emperor's name. To appease the algorithmic machine spirit and ensure it recognises your service, register your credentials or preferred seal in the comments below and distribute this data shunt to fellow adepts. For those seeking deeper archives, visit patreon.com/Historitor Corvo More to keep this transmission array running and the sacred vellum fresh. The links, as ever, are in the details below. But, dearest listener, our work never ends. Your clearance has been extended to the next prioritised file appearing on your Voxcast now. Proceed onwards, for our vigil continues, and I shall join you in the next one.